What is up, everyone? Volathis here, and of course the video title explains itself. This is my Final Fantasy XIV Realm Reborn Post-Thoughts. Now, of course, I have my pre-thoughts already been organized, and expect this video to be a lot longer because this is going up from that 2-week period to up until the launch of Heavensward, which by the time this video is probably up, I'm going to be playing pretty much religiously. And also the pre-thought video will also explain sort of my thought process, where it's coming from, as I have played in the MMORPG world game side for a very long time. So without further ado, we'll start off with my thoughts on the PvE content, and we'll just really start with the questing and the story behind the questing. Now, with the story and the quests involved in that and the side quest, there's a lot of stuff to cover with. Let's first start off with the Moogle delivery system. Now, at the moment I haven't finished it, but I found it to be a little bit interesting. It's definitely a nice little side quest involved, and I definitely like being involved with sort of the iconic things that we come to know and love from Final Fantasy, like the Moogles and the Chocobos and the Primals and everything. So I definitely enjoy it to a degree, and also these quests had stories of their own. And of course, the story itself is very large in perspective, and this is also one of the what I loved about this game with the quests, is that I was very involved with the story. I like the fact that there's usually, I would say, a huge amount of cutscenes, and I like the story behind it. I definitely like how the story is more fed to you, whereas back in WoW I would just skip through the quest line. I'm not going to read it, all that. And while it may be annoying at the fact that while the stories continue, you're very sent from point A to point B doing these meaningless tasks, to me, I feel like your character is developing and you are working towards being a hero. And to me, a hero doesn't have to be a person that always does extraordinary feats, such as we've done in this story with defeating Primals, defeating Bahamut, taking on the Crystal Tower and all that. I don't feel, while that's amazing, I feel like that even any hero is going to do those small tasks, just like a fireman rescues a cat from a tree. You do these things not because you want the fame, but because of the fact that you want to help people. Now, the other perspective of that is, yes, we do defeat Primals and all that. So our hero is sort of the character that when we're in a crunch, our character's usually been there to save the day, and that is kind of what I feel like is the story behind the Warrior of the Light. And of course, we are very involved with the help with the protection of Hydaelyn, the quests and all that, the Echo involved in our story that helps us, and of course, I loved the Primal stories that are involved with these quests. I love the raids that are involved. They're very detailed stories. In fact, the Final Coil, I haven't beat it currently, but I've done a lot of the cutscenes and the sort of the quests that are involved in that, and I have been loving the story that is involved with that. And after the quests, I really want to hop into the PvE content, like I said. Now, first thing I would like to start out with Fates. Being that I played Rift before, that's really what reminded me of the Fates, were the idea of rifts. Now, keep in mind that for me, though, Rift was very more involved in the world. It was very that if you left a rift just do its thing, it could honestly take over the air, whereas Fates are just more like those timed events, and if you fail it, you fail it, no big deal. But they were still, it definitely, sorry, I'm trying to collect my thoughts here. It served as a distraction, but it's a distraction that pays off. Like if you're, and it definitely mixes it up while you're leveling, like you're killing maybe something for a hunting log or questing in the air. Next thing you know, a fate pops up, you kill it, you get some XP, some gold, and some seals for it. And I felt like that was actually a very good option when I was leveling. In fact, I believe getting to 50 the first time, I was pretty much on a fate grind from 49 to 50, and I enjoyed it a lot. back when everyone was leveling. And then next, of course, we have the primals. And with the primals, you don't get a taste of the first one till at least level 20, of course, being Ifrit. And I liked in the beginning that the primary 3 that we started out in the story, and when these primals develop from story mode to hard mode to extreme, I liked how their overall kind of difficulty / requirements changed. When you're leveling up in the story, Garuda is the hardest one by far, and when you're doing hard mode, it always seems to be the Titan, and then once you go to extremes, requirement wise, if it's the hardest, but a lot of people still have difficulties with Titan extreme mode. And I like the introduction of all the primals we've had, and I like the idea also that the term primal is always being redefined through the story. How King Mogulmog was the first one we faced that everyone's like, well, is it a true primal or not? And as well, we also have the story primals with the Odin, which we discovered a lot more towards the end. I don't think Behemoth counts as a primal. It's more of just a giant beast, if I'm not mistaken. But I definitely like these introductions of these primals and how they work with the story. And I'm also looking forward to Iceheart, who's technically became a primal of Shiva and is left with this human shell. And I'm trying to wonder in the story if this means that maybe Shiva had some kind of effect on Iceheart and maybe possibly could have brainwashed her, but I don't know. As the story for primals is changing, and I honestly can't wait to see what the new primals we have in store. I have a feeling the first 2 primals are going to be standard primals, but additional primals are going to continue to change the story. And of course, we also dealt with lots of instances while leveling and continue to deal with instances. And I found out through the leveling process that I felt the dungeons were just the right difficulty. You don't start experiencing the more difficult dungeons till later. I want to say by 30 you start to understand that dungeons can start to become a lot harder. Towards the end though, I found myself getting a little tired out of the newer dungeons towards the, I want to say 40 plus to 50, just because it felt like the dungeons started to get very long and drawn out towards the end. I definitely know that when I was leveling any of my classes, I would always dread if I got something like Crutter's Cry or the Darkhold, and not really because of the difficulty, because to me their difficulty was fine. I mean, the one that I had I want to say the most difficulty was Chimera when leveling, but I caught on fairly quick. I would say after the first wipe I knew what I was doing, but it's just the fact that the dungeons take so long to complete, especially like Arnvel, the last one you get before you hit 50. It took way too long to beat, and I felt like I would spend an hour plus in some of those dungeons, and that was just too much for me. Now, the 50 dungeons, I didn't have a whole lot of problems with. In the beginning, the first 2, of course, with the Wondrous Palace and Amdapor Keep, were fairly hard. But once you started to get the gear you needed for them, they actually were fairly fine. And all the other dungeons that have been added, I've enjoyed greatly. And also the fact that I felt their difficulty was fine. Of course, when new dungeons came out, at first you're like, oh my god, this is too hard, or whatever, or maybe you had some difficulty, but honestly, once you got the hang of things and got the gear to help you, the dungeons weren't that bad. Post 50, I don't think I really had a particular one that I hated too much, just because of the fact that I was always trying to, it was just the fact that I'm always trying to rush through dungeons, just because a lot of them can take anywhere from 30 minutes plus, and I'm always shooting for the lowest amount of time to spend in a dungeon, because when I've been playing in WoW and stuff like that, I try to snowball through dungeons as quick as I can, because to me, dungeons aren't the end game. My end game is to raid, and dungeons are just something that I have to do to get maybe soldiery capped or something like that. So I usually try to snowball through those things. And unfortunately, it seems like to me, I can't snowball hard enough through them. Maybe it's me, or maybe it's just the way they're designed. Now, the only thing I think they need to do about the raids is just the fact that I feel like they need to take out some repeated mechanics, just because of the fact that you almost every final boss, you know there's going to be puddles of fire beneath you, or the dive bombs, or just anything like that. I feel like some of the mechanics have been a little bit overused, but I understand that this is a relative new game, and I'm happy that they're able to include at least what they can, and I can't wait to see what Alexander has to offer us. And of course, we come to the last part of the PvE discussion, which are the raids. And of course, we'll start off with the first two categories. You either, at this point when you're 50, you're either doing the Crystal Tower storyline or the Binding Coils of Bahamut, or both, like myself. Now, when Binding Coils came out first, of course, I didn't get to play that towards February. I didn't get to play it hard, at least to my liking, till February, because at the time I was still playing WoW, and without going into grave detail, I just eventually fully quit WoW in February and started to focus mainly on the raiding. I did raid before that on the Binding Coils, and I felt the difficulty was fine for it. It's something a little bit getting used to. I definitely like that this game, to me, functions a lot in the requirements that vanilla WoW did, with the whole you gotta do this quest just to do it. And I also like the fact that raid wise, if you want to go to the next tier raid, you gotta beat the final boss in the previous tier, no matter how easy the next boss may be. And that was something that you kind of had to get used to, is the fact that while turn 5 maybe you feel like is the hardest boss you'll fight, and then you'll go to T6 and be like, well, that was not even anywhere close to what T5 was. I feel like they focus a lot on the last boss, and I felt that was fine. I know T5 took me a long time to do, as well as T9, and currently, like I said when I'm recording this, I haven't beat turn 13, but I am on T13 and I've been enjoying it. I'm hoping that I can kill it before we get to the part where Heaven's Ward is out, otherwise I'll just have to go back, at least for story purposes. Now, the one thing to keep in mind, though, they also added in the Crystal Tower. Now, with the Crystal Tower, they said at first it was going to be kind of difficult. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. And we find out quickly that Crystal Tower is really meant to fill the gap, because currently in the game, I-70 and I-90, you have this gap of eye level 80, and that's what the Crystal Tower did. And that's what Crystal Tower has continued to do. It's really been the one that would fill in the gap of your gear. Towards later, Crystal Tower kind of just added the pre-upgraded equipment. Now, there was definitely one thing I had to get used to this game. I'm still on the edge about, is the fact that for every class you play, your best in slot is not 100% raid gear. That is something I have personally had to get used to, because back in WoW, if you're not raiding, you're not going to get the best in slot gear, especially if you're doing PvE only. To me, I don't feel that's exactly right, but I also find it that it makes it a little bit easier, because of the fact that if you've played games like WoW and stuff, you will grind the same boss for months and months and just hope your piece of gear drops. And on top of that, you not only have to hope it drops, you have to hope you don't lose it to someone else, especially if you've been farming it for months. So I do enjoy the fact that my best in slot isn't raid gear, but at the same time I kind of wish it was, just because of the fact that it's a way to make me stand out and say, look, I've done in-game content. And Crystal Tower to me has always been like what looking for raid has been for WoW. It's not the hardest thing in the world. It's actually usually very easy, as long as you don't fall asleep during it and just do the mechanics for it. And once you get so geared, you can pretty much just ignore the mechanics at all. I did enjoy the story with it. I liked most of the looks of the loot, and let's go ahead and just talk about the binding coils again. Now, I enjoy the Allagan gear very much. In fact, it's usually most of my transmogs is that I try to do the Allagan gear just to make it look like, hey, I've been in raid content, etc, etc. But I also like the story behind it. I also like the fact that while in WoW, it was usually you would go to the one place and you go through all this trash and everything. I kind of like the fact that I know that if I go into a turn, minus turn 3 of course, but we're not going to talk about that. Square Enix doesn't want to talk about that anymore. But I like the fact that I know that if I go into a turn, I know there's a boss at the end. I may or may not have trash to kill, and that's about it. I feel like it makes it seem a little bit quicker, and I feel like if you can beat a turn, it makes you feel like you've done something for the week, whereas maybe if there's a bunch of bosses, if you kill them all, it doesn't feel like you actually completed it for the week. I mean, it's roughly the same, but I guess these both kind of involve different feelings. But the other thing that I also had to get used to, which I'll have to talk about later on too, is the fact that towards the end, your Zodiac weapon becomes equivalent to raid gear, but at the same time, or to your raid weapon. But I totally forgot that if you think of the relic like a legendary in other games, usually the legendary will either become greater than the raid gear or it becomes equivalent to. So I'm actually pretty okay with that on that end. The only other thing to talk about raid wise would have to be normal versus savage, and unfortunately currently when this video is being made, I haven't done savage yet. I've been very interested in savage difficulty, but I'm also the kind of person that I need a reward to kind of want to be motivated to do it. And unfortunately, when they added savage difficulty, there's no loot difference. It's just the best you could do is titles, and even before then, the titles weren't even added. But good things to come is the fact that we have in the expansion is that it's the raids are gonna be normal and savage is gonna be the new. And that, to me, savage has always felt like heroic raiding from what the description of what I've read, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I've done heroic bosses and everything, and I honestly can't wait to be raiding in Alexander. Next, of course, we have sort of a quick discussion about PvP in this game. Unfortunately, as it currently stands, I find that the PvP is a little lackluster. But then again, I'm not a huge PvP person. The first thing, of course, that we got for PvP was the Wolves Den, and I will admit it did sound fun. The only problem I had with Wolves Den and Mr. Happy, and also being a person, I did try WoW arenas and stuff. I feel like the Wolves Den, to me, just reminds me too much of Arena, and there's not enough competitive gameplay in that. It's just getting up to max PvP gear and you're done, unless you're really the type of person that just wants to gloat over the person. Now, we have been told that in the upcoming expansion, PvP is going to have seasons and everything, and you can get titles as well as just getting perhaps loot that is only applied to people who get high up there. And honestly, I can't wait to look forward to that. And I'm not sure if the ranking system will apply only to the Wolves Den, but maybe just the fact that it might apply to the others. The other thing that I don't exactly like is that to do the Wolves Den, you are restricted to 4 types of classes. I feel like, to me, PvP should just be like, well, if let's say maybe 5 summoners can beat you, why not? I don't feel like that you should be very restrictive about what kind of classes join in PvP, because if you do, you just increase the queue times and all that. And of course, we also have the Cardinal Flats, which to me reminded me a lot of like AV, maybe on a smaller scale, and it was also the first time there was a 3-faction verse, but I also enjoyed that aspect. The one thing I didn't like is the fact that this game mode did not only an eye level sync, but it also makes your PvP gear useless. And if I'm the person that plays PvP, I want to make sure the gear that I'm getting is an investment, and if my PvP gear isn't going to work in this map, I feel like that's not a proper investment. I understand the want to let everyone be able to play it, but I feel like if you're going to do that, you should also make the hardcore content, or at least have the game mode besides the Wolves Den that allows people who have worked on this PvP gear to actually be able to use it. And the other pet peeve I have about that too is just the slaughter game mode, because to me, if I wanted to play the slaughter game mode, I want to have PvP gear and be like, I've been working at this gear, I should be rewarded. I did like the idea though of the personal limit breaks. I want to know if they plan to add that in the future, maybe in PvE content, or just maybe be able to generate it on your own, possibly, but without the PvP as it stands right now, unless they add more game, if they add more game maps, that's okay, but I expect to have maps where I can use the PvP gear I've been working on. The only other thing I have to say is stat-wise, I like the PvP gear. I love PvP stats. I like PvP only skills, and I think the PvP gear looks fine. The work they need to do on is the fact that there needs to be more game modes that allow you to use that PvP gear. Now, with Wolves Den becoming competitive, I might be able to look to the side, but they still need to add more game modes that allow PvP gear to work. And the next thing I want to talk about is just really talking about the relic that we worked on. For the most part, I would say I enjoyed working on getting the relic. I just recently got a Zeta. Unfortunately, I put that off too long. Part of that is the fact that when it comes to these type of games with MMORPGs, if it's going to be an investment, I do not like any RNG content. I do not like relying on drop rates. I may be being a whiner here, but when it usually comes to any drop rate, such as Atmas, I feel like I'm one of the people that usually gets screwed on that. I feel like I usually have to work a lot harder to get those drop rates, just because of the fact that I know that, and of course that part of that is just because it's RNG. There's nothing I can do about it, but I know there's plenty of people that do the RNGs and get done in like a few hours or a few days, and then I spend weeks or months. When the Atma came out, I got burned out so fast. I spent probably at least a couple months just trying to get my Atma finished, and by the time I was done with that, I really wasn't motivated to catch up on my weapon. I honestly threw it on the shelf for the longest time, and then recently picked it back up and grinded as hard as I could to be done with it. But when it comes to RNG, I don't like that. I like guaranteed results. To me, an Animus honestly was now granted, when I did the Animus it was nerfed, but to me doing an Animus was easier than an Atma, because while I was relying on the drop rates for the Atma to an Animus, I knew that over a guaranteed amount of time I would get the result. When it comes to RNG though, you don't have a guaranteed window. You could possibly have infinite amount of time investment and still never reach your goal. Towards the end, I honestly enjoyed it a lot. I liked the transformation that we eventually got with the relic. I'm wondering in the expansion if our weapon's going to evolve a lot more, and the fact that it's going to change a lot more now with the model in that, or maybe just here and there, which either way I'm fine with it. Now that I've done a Zeta, I feel like it was a worthy investment. I probably should have done it sooner, but like I said, once you get held back on something like that, especially as long as a time investment as this game was for the weapon, I couldn't keep up, and it just fell off to the side. And since we talked about the relic, I feel like it's necessary to move on to discussing classes. Now, obviously, in my pre-thoughts, the only class I mainly played was the Thaumaturge, and eventually became a Black Mage. And I feel like just about every class in Final Fantasy has their own niche, especially in this MMORPG. I feel like they each fill the role that the other does. And we'll start, of course, with the Black Mage. I feel like it fills the role of being a caster, of the magic caster with the high damage numbers very well. I've enjoyed playing this class. I like some of the support abilities I have, and also my cooldowns. And of all the classes, I really don't have one that I particularly hate. I don't think I could ever go, oh man, I hate playing this class. I would say priority wise, I think Summoner comes sort of last for me, which is kind of funny because of the fact that gear wise, it's going to scale mostly off my Black Mage. And it's mainly because of the fact that I don't like pet classes too much. They're usually not my favorite just because you're very dependent on that pet, and the second it's dead, I just lost a huge chunk of my DPS. Now, obviously, I don't hate the Summoner. It's just, I find it very hard to play pet classes because you have to maintain that pet, because without the pet or any sacrifice ability like we're going to be getting in the future, I feel like it's a wasted effort if I lose that pet. And discussing the Summoner, I think it works very well. The only thing I've found they've had problem with is, of course, their mana issues and the need to be updated and all that. But other than that, I think Summoner's fine. I feel like the fact that they may not have those cooldown abilities that help the raid group, they sort of make it up with having a res. And then the next that I usually play would probably be the healers, and I feel like they work very well together. The White Mage being your direct / region healer. I feel like it's a very classic healer, but at the same time it's a necessary healer. And the Scholar, I actually like playing. I feel like each one works a lot better. Like the White Mage, I feel like if I'm speedrunning, I'm going to be a White Mage, not a Scholar. I feel like the Scholar is a very in-game based class. It's one that you really want to have at least one of in a raid. If I had to do double, it would be probably double White Mage, but I feel like a Scholar you practically need. It's also probably the closest class to almost being a hybrid because of the fact that it's one of the few that it can DPS while still healing, and I love the idea of all of its shields. And it looks like in the expansion both of these classes are getting the sort of kind of boost they are, like the Scholar is getting more better AoE heals that they've been lacking. And of course we have the tanks, with it being the Warrior and the Paladin, and each being the Warrior's more the DPS tank versus the Paladin, which is your straight up defensive tank. Its best abilities is mainly being that main tank. And then of course we have other DPS. We have the Lancer, well, Dragoon, which has a polearm, and I honestly probably one of my favorite melee classes just because of the fact that I feel like polearms are usually added in games, but most of the MMORPGs I played, they haven't been very, I hate to use the word, but sort of mainstream. It's just if you get a polearm, it's like okay, but it doesn't really make that much of a difference, where this class is all about using that polearm and sticking to using that polearm. And also the fact that it's one of the ones that of course is supposed to be part dragon, and who doesn't want to be part dragon? And then of course we have Monk and Ninja. I feel like they each do their position very well, especially with there being a fist fighter, and of course the Ninja being a very fast rogue-like class. I honestly was excited when they added the Ninja, and I definitely am looking forward to the new classes as well, and just see what they can offer. Now, as they stated before, they don't think they're going to be adding any more classes mid-expansion. I'm okay with that. Honestly, the whole adding a class before an expansion came up caught me by surprise. I think the reason they said that happened is because they were working on it when they were remaking this game, but they just never got around to it. And honestly, I like all the classes that they have, and I can't wait for the new classes to come out. And of course I had to talk about the world. Of course, towards the end of the game, I've seeing a lot more sections of it, and I love the design of most of the world, the dungeons, the higher level content, and thanks to the sightseeing logs, I've actually ran into more different areas to enjoy within the world. And of course, with talking about the classes, I have to talk about the crafting and gathering. Now, with the crafting, it gets, I would say, very repetitive. With the leveling, the cross skills are actually very useful, and I found out later on essential. Now, gear-wise, towards the end, you put a lot of time and effort into being a crafter, and eventually towards the end of the game, we became these omni crafters, where you basically had one kind of crafter, and basically you could share the gear with all of it. And honestly, I'm a huge fan of that, just because of the time and the money invested into it. You have to think that if you were going to be the big star crafter, you had to invest a lot of money and materia, and I'm not exactly a huge fan of that. And I was definitely more on board with the fact that once you start getting the gear on one character, it could be shared with the others. And then with the gatherers, I started to level them up. I found it fairly simple to do, of course. With the nodes, I actually like the idea that the times were revolving around the gatherer, so you do want to keep track of what is up, and actually kept a very good market. I also like the idea of sharing the gear towards the end. I was a little surprised on how fishing, you really didn't want the GP stats just because they're useless currently in fishing. I know that they've said that plan for it to be useful in the upcoming expansion, which will be good, because honestly, if I had invested a lot of money into crafters, I probably would have made separate fishing gear with separate stats. And next, I would like to discuss about mounts. Now, obviously, I can't just go straight into mounts. We have to talk about the main mount, the Chocobo, which I am completely was excited about being able to ride a Chocobo, the nostalgia and all that, and also later on what became of the Chocobo, with it being more than just a mount. It is also your companion that you use for battle. They could be healer, tank. And I like that you can continue to level it, as well as I also like the Chocobo armor for the customization, as well as the whole coloring your Chocobo and naming it, just making it feel like this is the Chocobo meant only for you. And as well, when they added on later the Chocobo racing, having it being a separate Chocobo. I also like the fact that there's a lot of different mounts in this game. Granted, there are a few skinned mounts that are basically the same color, but honestly, I kind of expect that kind of stuff when I play these MMORPGs. It's very easy to reskin the same mount and just give it a different color, and I was okay with that, because the one that they did the reskinning the most were the ponies, and they ended up having a use later on getting all the pony colors just to get a special pony mount. And there's not a whole lot of mounts. I like their kind of how each of them is very different, and a lot of them are hosted from mounts in game. I've also been very particular that the Final Fantasy developers have listened to us, and they've made some of the mounts that we've requested, and I continue to wait to see what also they have in the future. I also like the fact that some mounts just simply have different music while riding, and that I love the fact that it just switches it up in game. And can't wait to see what also new mounts we're gonna get, and also maybe hope that some of the old things we've beaten before, like Cough Twin Tanya, might become a mount maybe later in the game. And since I talked briefly about the Chocobo racing, I want to touch on the subject of Gold Saucer. And I was honestly a little surprised with the fact that they didn't go with Gil, but now that I look back on it, it was probably a better plan to not use Gil and use their own currency, just because of the fact, one, you can get away with it, because one, it's a casino, essentially, and casinos usually have their own currency for money that you pay for. And also the simple fact that if they didn't do that, I have a feeling Gil would get out of control completely. And I definitely like the theme with it. I like the fact that there's the mini games that you don't get much of a reward, but you know, something very simple to do, as well as the gates. I've only done one gate so far, and I had a lot of fun with it. Of course, gates are only really gold saucer fates, and of course I have done a little bit of chocobo racing. I've had a little bit of fun with that. I'll probably be playing more of it later on. And we've also heard that they plan to expand it, maybe with more games in it. And I honestly like it as a little side thing that you can do on your own. And of course, enjoying the lottery here and there, hoping one day I'll win it, just like in real life. Oh wait, I don't play the lottery in real life, so I guess I'll never win that one. But anyways, the other thing, of course, is the items. I like the mount that they have there. I think the items they added were fantastic. I probably won't be getting any of the weapons, but I feel like everything they added was very neat to the gold saucer about that. And of course, talking about gold saucer. And next we'll talk about sort of the standard things that I expected to be involved in the game and all that. But first, I want to talk about housing. I was excited from the first time that I heard there was going to be housing back, what was it, pre 2.1. I don't know, it's been so long. It's been a feature of this game for so long. I was very excited when they said it was going to be free company housing and when it would later become player-based housing. Unfortunately, I still have not bought a house yet. I could buy a small house, but that's a different story. I'm not looking for just a small player house, but I definitely enjoy the housing and the housing items and the variety it brings to the game with the addition of the housing items. And I definitely could see that in a house you can constantly change it, and it's content that will be continued to add, and it's going to keep changing. And on the subject of housing, I want to talk about the free companies. Now, the first thing I thought when it was a free company, of course, was a guild, and that's essentially what a free company is. And I felt like in other MMOs, usually when they do these sort of guilds, they usually want you to recruit players, and of course that should be your goal anyways, but in most games you want to invite people to the free company because of the, or to your guild, because of the fact that it is a benefit to you, not essentially the player. I mean, you will get the buffs and stuff, but like in WoW, we would recruit people just so we could get generate free repair money. While as the current system in Final Fantasy, it's more of a benefit to the player because you do have that community of players with you, and you also generate your own buffs, and of course the ethereal wheel and all that, and also the free company housing. I feel like just gives you a point of access. Be like, so let's hang out today, let's go to the free company house and maybe discuss our plans and everything. It's just a nice place to meet. Usually I find myself being at my free company house, and of course I loved when they added the rooms, just because of the fact that it also gives you another reason to go to that free company house. And of course, it did come with a free company chest. I do usually expect stuff like that. I feel like guilds need their own chest just if they want to donate stuff or anything like that in guild. And of course, I want to talk about the retainers that I discovered later on. And of course, I found retainers a very good add to the game. I feel like it's a little bit more simplified just because of the retainer basically handles everything that an MMORPG usually is dealt with by more than one NPC, whereas in this, your retainer is your bank, your person who sells your own stuff, and they also find stuff and bring it to you. I couldn't ask for a better combo with the three. I mean, I definitely liked it once I unlocked it, and I feel like that, of course, they even added where retainers could be deployed at your house or at free company housing. They just keep becoming relevant to me, and I usually visit my retainer like 50 times a day. I'm not even kidding, to check prices and everything, and I feel like it's amazing that all that stuff I need is in that one spot. And I can't wait to see what they have in the future content. Now when they of course added you could get 2 retainers for extra money, I was actually pretty okay with that. some people might say that, well, if they're going to add like this, that's borderline free-to-play nonsense. But you know what? I don't feel like in this game you really need 4 retainers. If it had been like, oh, if you don't have 4 retainers, you're going to be screwed later on, you're going to be deleting your items. But I've gotten by just fine with 2 retainers plus my own inventory space. And there's even been talk that in the expansion we're getting an extra retainer. They haven't said if it's going to be additional fee or if we're just going to get it for free. Hopefully, if they're adding it because probably of worries about inventory, I hope they add it for free and not charging it, but we'll have to wait and see. And of course, with the discussion of extra money, we have to bring up the cash shop. Now, cash shops are almost standard now, even if you're a subscription-based MMORPG, and I feel like it's, for the most part, okay. You have to watch it with what you put in, and so far, all they've done is put in mounts, which is practically standard, and I'm okay with, as well as minions you can buy. Perfectly okay with that. They put in dies, and they even said that these dies you can find on your own. So it's not like they're really shoving it in your face and saying you should buy our dies. Or now, of course, you do have to buy the mounts if you want. But the other thing they added in, which caught me by surprise, is the fact that they added in that any seasonal item that you missed, which when I play MMORPGs, usually the seasonal content is so much time and effort, I usually don't get everything. You can buy those items if you miss the seasonal event. But on top of that, that leads me into, of course, the seasonal events. I've loved these seasonal events because they don't take a whole chunk of time for me to do. I feel like I can do it very easily, get it done, and unlike other MMORPGs, I can usually get everything I want that they have for sale during those events, and I'm completely okay with their seasonal events. And of course that leads me into internal bonding, because I almost forgot about the player shop, which of course internal bonding has been sort of this form of marriage / huge friendship. And of course it came with 3 different plans: a free plan, a $10 plan, and I think a $20, and that's just for one person. The other player has to also pay for it as well, and it's a one-time fee. I'm perfectly okay with that, and I feel like as long as you're spending the money and you get what you want, that's perfectly alright. And I find it pretty awesome because of the fact that in-game marriages are becoming more and more popular, and I feel like this is just another way. Well, you can go get married in the real world, and you can just go get married in game, or do both at the same time, I suppose, if you can find a preacher that's willing to do that. And I definitely like how the cutscenes are involved with it, and how you have so much customization into that marriage, especially if you donate the money for it. And of course, the other little bits of content we have gotten, we have sightseeing logs. I haven't really done them just because of the fact that it does require, unfortunately, a lot of waiting. And usually if I'm queued for something, I honestly forget about it or anything like that. But I definitely like the addition of challenge logs. It gives you sort of like weekly goals to get done. And also it usually rewards you with either gil or XP or both. Sometimes you get PvP marks and all that. And I like these little pieces of side content. And that leads to my next subject, which at this point I would say is talking about the, I guess you could say, the community / the developers in this game. And when I started playing this game, I heard about live letters, and I'm like, well, what's a live letter? And for anyone that doesn't know, I'm going to describe this to the best of my ability. Now, we know about in WoW and stuff like that, that the information, for the most part, isn't really thrown at you. I understand, like, right before a big patch comes, Blizzard will be like, well, here's what's going to happen. And that's really what a live letter was. But I felt like it was more community-based. Now, granted, in mind that this is from Square Enix, and this is coming from the Final Fantasy XIV development team based in Japan. I don't speak that much Japanese. Honestly, I wouldn't even say that I can understand 99.9% of Japanese. I understand simple words, not even enough to make a conversation here. But while they are in Japanese, that we do have a strong community that is willing to translate that. And there has been, at certain times, actual English live letters. But I love these live letters because it's where the developers meet and talk to you and be like, this is what we are doing right now, and this is what you can expect in the future. And at the same time, they also do these huge events where they're asking the community questions, and they want you to ask questions, and depending on what you ask and the overflow, you might get a question answered, and they tease us with information, and I honestly love that. And I always look forward to every live letter we get. Now, I think I may have only saw one, or maybe it was later on, but it was definitely something I had to bring up about this game. And the other section of that is they get. Obviously didn't get this when I started playing, but it came later, and they have what they call veteran rewards. And I played Aeon before, and this is very similar from Aeon. It might have even been called Veteran Rewards, I can't remember. But Veteran Rewards is basically just little things that the people that you get in-game that basically says, I've been subbed for so many months. And I don't ever expect like something that has to go tremendous and out of the way for the developers, but it's nice to know that it's a little thank you to say thank you for subbing to the game. And let's see, that's about all of what I had to talk about. The other part of that too is, being that I was level 20, I also faced my first primal Ifrit, and honestly, I enjoyed fighting that primal fight. It did feel like, I wouldn't say like a raid, but it felt like sort of an epic boss fight. It was relatively simple, and of course, with this being it was a story primal, and I learned later on that it was about to get much harder. I think the first time I tried it, I wiped, and then we caught on real quickly, and then we killed it, of course. And that's all I have to say about my pre-thoughts. And I was going to rate these things, so I'm probably just going to come up with some ratings in my head and then give. It's not going to be average calculated. I'm just going to give you sort of my thoughts on it. And bear in mind that, if I'm correct here, PvP never became a thing till I was after 50, and even then the lowest Q was 35, so I'm not going to talk about that. I am going to tell you, though, I am making an Afterthoughts video, and expect that Afterthoughts roughly about the same time that Heaven's Ward is about to start. And I am going to make a pre-thoughts of Final Fantasy XIV Heaven's Ward 2 weeks after it starts. Yes, I know the Alexander raid is coming about 2 weeks after it starts. I'm still going to make the video. I'll probably make other videos to update my opinions on this. And I also, in the comments below, want you guys to express your opinions about this game, as well as what do you agree with me, what do you disagree, all of that stuff. So let's go into what I'm going to do. Now, with quests, I would say about a 6. That's, I would say, because there's definitely a lot of fetch quests which do turn away my opinion about the quest, but I definitely like the story involved in them. It's just a general rating. Next, we have the crafting. I'm giving the crafting a 7 out of 10, mainly because of the fact that it is really something I feel is unique. Well, crafting is not unique, but it's very unique, and that it's actually rewarding for the time you invest into it. At the same time, there's always room for improvement, of course, on that end. Gathering, I would say about a 6, just because gathering is always the more, I feel like the more work involved, especially when you are playing, and at the time I didn't really have a whole lot of thoughts on that. The next part, I guess, would be the PvE, and being that I only played to 20, it's a little bit hard not to come up with like the rating, but I'm gonna have to say at the time about a 7 out of 10. Actually, let's make that an 8 out of 10. I'm sorry. The 8 out of 10, just because I did get that taste of the dungeons. Now, there's a lot of parts that I don't like about it when leveling, the guild has and all that, but the primal battle and the dungeons I felt were worth it at a time. And the community, I would honestly give it, I want to say a 9, just because for the most part, I didn't have a whole lot of negative experiences in the beginning. I did have, you know, it wasn't a very trolly community, and it's not really, in the beginning, it wasn't really a hateful community. And I count that towards, of course, the live letters, which is, I thought was something that they're reaching out to the players. And that just leaves me, I didn't talk a whole lot about the other classes just because when I was originally playing, for the most part, it was tunnel vision about getting that thaumaturge to level 20. Oh, I totally forgot to talk about the looks of this game, besides the world. How could I forget that? When I started playing, I liked the customization I got out of it. And being that customization, I would say graphically for this game is a 9 out of 10 for me. I think it's just about the right amount of graphics. I don't usually want to say a 10 out of 10 because there's always room for improvement. So moving back to what I was talking, there was something else I wanted to say, but I think that's about it, and that really just leaves with my final rating for the game when I was starting out at level 20. I would say when I was that 1 to 20, I would say a 7 out of 10, because I hadn't gotten a full taste of what brought me into this game, but at the time it was a good game. And bear in mind, like I said, when I was playing this, I had to play WoW at the same time, and I was raiding at the same time, and you know, I was playing this game on the side, and I still hadn't said this is the game I'm gonna play. So that is my final rating for that, and we're gonna end the video there. I'm sorry that this is such a long video. I'm definitely going to be putting in, of course, a bunch of annotations to link you out the video if there's a particular part you want to hear. It will be there for you, and I just wanted to say, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment down below. I definitely want to hear your guys' opinion. Do you agree with my ratings? I understand that this was a little jumpy in the video. Unfortunately, that's how my brain thinks. No matter if I write a script or anything, I jump around all the time because that's how my brain works. Subscribe to stay updated to my channel, and of course, always expect more videos to come from me. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye. And now the only last real section I have is the other side, of course, which most of this has been other, but I want to talk about the community. I found this community to be very uplifting. I mean, of course, there's always going to be negative players. I realize that as a person, there will always be negative with positive, but for the most part, I don't see a lot of negativity in this server. It's also, I feel like it's a very helpful community. A lot of people are willing to give you advice. I mean, granted, like I said, there are going to be the negative people out there, but you know, I feel like it's a community that we all want roughly the same thing. There's usually, from what I hear, not a whole lot of disagreement, and of course, I felt like this is a very open game because of what we have with live letters and the developer blogs. I feel like this game is very communicative with their community and are willing to listen to us and think about what we're saying and possibly even apply later. This is one of the few games where people have asked for it, and I will admit probably some people have begged, but we have actually asked for, you know, can we get this, this, and this, and it's really amazing to hear the developer to go, we'll look into it and see what we think about it, and some of those things do end up becoming a reality. For example, housing started out as free company only, and it later became single player houses, and I honestly love the live letters. I wish I could speak enough Japanese to just watch it and chill and listening to these things, but it's very awesome because it's not only teasing the content that we're coming, but it's I always want to know what happened in the live letter, and they answer questions that come from us. Granted, it has to go through a big filter system, but that's to be expected. You know, they got to make sure they don't say the spoilers that aren't ready to be spoiled, even though a lot of times they apparently mess up and spoil it to us anyways. But it's definitely a lot to throw at us, and I enjoy this game, and I hope to be playing this game for many more years to come, depending on the road, of course, that they go. And with Heavensward around the corner, what I want to say is just I hope that this game continues to change, and just they need to keep up the great work that I think they're doing. I think they're doing spectacular. Like I said, I compare this to WoW, but to me this game I'm comparing it to vanilla WoW, because you shouldn't compare a game to that is to another game like WoW, for instance, that's 10 years old plus. It's not a fair comparison. If you're going to compare it, you should compare apples to apples. You don't compare, you know. And without further ado, the last part of this is I want to give my ratings. I'm going to divide it up into 3 sections here. It's going to be the PvE, the PvP, and just the other, which is basically the order of what I did in the video. We'll start with the PvE. My final rating for that is going to be, we'll say, an 8 out of 10. There's always room for improvement. It sounds like a lot of what they're going to be doing in Heavensward is they're going to eliminate that confusion. Savage is going to be the new heroic like it was supposed to be. It's going to provide better loot and all that. And I don't really run out of too much PvE. Usually if I'm done with my black mage on content, I usually just go to the other classes and do a turn or whatever. So, and I haven't really disliked most of it. It just needs that little tweak of improvement, and just the fact that the other problem with it is just the fact that there's so many different levels. I would like them to kind of maybe tunnel it a little bit better, but I understand that's a little bit harder to do. And then, of course, the next part is the PvP. I'm giving that like a 5 out of 10. There's so much room for improvement, but it sounds like in Heavensward we're going to be getting those improvements. So I obviously will I'm hoping to have a different rating for my pre-thoughts of Heavensward as well as my post-thoughts for that. And the other content, honestly, I want to say 9 out of 10. I'm not a real big person on doing 10 out of 10s because I think everything can be improved, or I may find something that just brings it down. But the retainers are amazing. All the side content to keep me occupied and everything is wonderful. So I'm going to say that puts my rating for this game at a 9 out of 10. I know that doesn't make sense math-wise, but you know what? I've been playing this game. I've been practically addicted to this game, and honestly, I just always go back to it. I haven't quit it for any time, but when it comes to my MMORPG, I keep going back to it, and I'm enjoying it. And unless something bigger comes along, or maybe the game just develops into something I don't like, I don't imagine I won't be playing this for years to come, like I said previously. So just expect, without further ado, that's about it. So let's go with a wrap up. Just to let you guys know, I will be streaming as much Heavensward as possible, and just to check out for the pre-thoughts, which I will make probably after 2 weeks of content. I probably won't make it at exactly at 2 weeks, but I will make it with 2 weeks about of information, which means it will probably be about the time Alexander unlocks. So good luck on me getting that video out. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment down below. Talk about maybe your favorite parts. Do you agree with my opinions? Something I may have missed. I've already thought of a few things I missed, so I'll probably have to go back and add more audio about it. But I will see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with my channel and see the many videos to come, and also check out my Twitch page in the description, which I will be streaming a lot more often here soon, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.